Hi, I'm Martin Kelly of Friends Journal, and in the current October issue, we have an interview of Nicole Nettleton, but it's done by Carl Blumenthal, and I have Carl on the line here. Carl's a member of Brooklyn Meeting. Welcome, Carl.
Nice to be here, Martin.
So you've written this, you did this interview with Nicole, and her organization is Differently Abled Friends and Allies. Is that
That's right.
the correct? And you also wrote last year, in April 2021, an article, Quakers and Mental Health Care, which is like a tour de force overview, 2,500 words. For us, that's an overview. I'm sure much more could be written about the history of Quakers and mental health care. So tell me in as few or as many words why this is an important topic for you.
Okay, well, let's start with the interview with Nicole. When it was my second job out of college. My first job was with the Consumer Rights Group. My second job was with the Massachusetts Multiple Sclerosis Society, and I did fundraising, I did communications, I worked with clients, and actually, my journalistic career began with an article I wrote about two women who lived with multiple sclerosis. This was back in 1976, and it was published in the Peabody, Massachusetts Times. So that was my first of hundreds of articles as a journalist. I guess you could say it launched my career.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one data point. And of course, and then I already mentioned the Multiple Sclerosis Society, where I worked for a year or so. And during that time, I also became a volunteer for what was called the Boston Self-Help Center,
Mm-hmm.
which was a disability rights program. And we did things like especially work for accessibility for people with physical disabilities, either because they were in wheelchairs or used other adaptive devices to get around. Um, Demonstrated in the MTA, the Boston MTA, for greater accessibility, and they also had
That's the public transportation, right?
yeah,
Subways, buses.
right,
Sure.
yeah, and they also had a consciousness raising group. Like what Nicole is doing right now for New York Yearly Meeting. It was, and in this group, which was made up of people um, almost exclusively with physical disabilities, I was the only person with a psychiatric disability. Um, I learned an awful lot about, what the experience was like for people with physical disabilities besides those that had multiple sclerosis, which is a neurological disorder. I mean, there are multiple other reasons why people have physical disabilities, either because of accidents that they've experienced or um, birth defects, like spina bifida
Mhm.
um, and muscular dystrophy is another one. So kind of when I got an invitation, and I don't remember exactly how, from Nicole about this group back, I guess it was last past winter, I was curious and thought, well, this was a way of kind of revisiting the beginning of my career
Yeah.
and my concerns at the time, because since then, I've gone in the direction of working almost exclusively in with people with psychiatric disorders, like myself. I live with bipolar disorder and have for like 50 years. And I, back in 2000, after being an urban planner for the first 25 years of my career, I became a peer counselor, a mental health peer counselor in 2002. So this is the work that I'm devoted to, and I've written, as you know, several articles, book reviews, also about this concern. It's called behavioral health care, which includes both mental health and substance use.
Yeah, and these are huge topics. I mean, for so many people, so many families. I have in my extended family these issues. So many of us do. Uh,
Yes.
so what's changed in the last few years about this, both in the wider world, but also with friends?
Well, to reference my article that was written during the pandemic about the history of Quaker involvement in the reform of the mental health care system, going back to the 1790s at the York Retreat in England, where Quakers practiced what was called moral treatment. Um, Many of the practices today that you find in psychiatric treatment and psychiatric rehabilitation, things like horticultural therapy, um, occupational therapy. These are all things that Quakers induced in these country retreats that they promoted back in the late 1790s. And then that vision was brought to the States by a Quaker um, minister named Thomas Scattergood,
Hmm.
um, who helped found the Friends, well, it was called Friends Asylum at the time, later became Friends Hospital in Philadelphia in 1812. And that hospital was in existence as a nonprofit until I guess about 15 years ago,
Yeah.
when, because of financial difficulties, it was sold to a for-profit, and part of about 20% of the capital of the invested in the Scattergood Foundation, which is a Philadelphia foundation concerned about behavioral health. And they've done a lot of work in innovations in that sector. So I would say that particularly the what we call the peer movement, people living with mental health challenges, um, more and more of us now are being hired because of our lived experience, in addition to the training received. I'm certified by New York State. I had to go through, I had to take like 15 online courses and then 2,000 hours of various internships, work, and volunteer work in order to receive my certification. This workforce keeps expanding. Not only because it's what's called an evidence-based treatment. In other words, it works almost as well as things like talk therapy by trained social workers and psychologists, but uh, it just happens that because we don't have degrees, although I have a master's in public health, a lot of peers, because of their history of mental illness, may not have had the opportunity to get secondary education, and they may not have the MSWs or the masters in counseling. So we don't get paid as much.
Yeah.
So it's cheaper for the system, for the mental health care system. So I
It
guess
doesn't
you
care
could,
about the money. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I've just gotten a new job working as a peer counselor at one of Brooklyn's hospitals, NYU Langone. So I'm looking forward to starting that in a couple of weeks. So that is a long way of saying that, and this program that I'm going to work for is a brand new one. It was funded during the pandemic, specifically to help people with severe mental illness,
Mhm.
psychosis, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and it employs both clinical treatment, peer support, and socioeconomic resources. In other words, it's a holistic approach to mental health treatment, and I think that's one of the innovations that has come about, is that people see mental health as not just something that is biological or genetic in origin that can be part of it, but there are a lot of other factors. There's family upbringing, there's environment, there's socioeconomic poverty, racism, all these things factor into a person's mental health. And now we're seeing that it's not just a matter of medication and maybe some talk therapy. You need to actually treat the whole person.
Sure, which should be common sense, but often isn't. So tell us what's happening in New York Yearly Meeting. One of the stories about the Differently Abled Friends and Allies organization that Nicole tells is that she went to see what they were doing, and turns out they sort of were defunct. They weren't doing anything, and she just sort of rolled up her sleeves and said, "Well, okay, I'm going to do it. I can do some Zooms," and kind of
Right.
restarted it. So, what's happening in New York Yearly Meeting, and do you know if other yearly meetings have comparable programs?
I don't know. You'd have to ask Nicole. She might know. I think this is probably pretty unique. I don't know what the origins of it were and why it went quiet for a while, but as you said, Nicole took the bull by the horn, so to speak, and has learned a lot about how to do Zoom meetings, and now she's programming the meetings ahead of time. Every month there are announcements in the New York Yearly Meeting newsletter and in the Brooklyn Meeting newsletter about what the topics are for discussion. People are asked to sign up ahead of time. And so she's making every effort to publicize the group. And I participated in a few of them, and they're very helpful. I mean, the quality of the discussion is very, very high on both a spiritual, psychological, physical health realm
Right.
level. So, yeah.
So
Like
how do people
I
get?
think the last couple of
Oh, I was just going to ask,
oh
how do
well,
people get in touch with Differently Abled Friends and Allies?
uh, as I said, you can go to the New York Yearly Meeting website, nyym.org, and look for the, the, I guess you'd have to sign up for the weekly newsletter of New York Yearly Meeting and get the announcements, or you can get them directly by emailing Nicole, which is in the article I wrote. I don't remember the exact address,
Okay,
something
well,
like Nicole Nettleton at gmail.com.
sure. Well, it'll be in the issue. The issue is a print issue, but
Yeah,
also, as with every French journal article, it's online and available in the
yeah,
uh, online issue.
yeah. So I encourage people to check it out. It's important that it's not just differently abled friends, it's also allies. It's people who, like you said, may have family members or just friends or just be interested as social activists in wanting to see a better life for people with disabilities of all sorts. And between physical and mental and intellectual disabilities, we're talking 60, 70 million Americans. So it's a pretty substantial amount of the population.
Yeah, and of course, the pandemic didn't help anything, and the isolation of it
Right,
probably made
right,
everything
right.
worse for a lot of people. Yeah.
And that is now probably not officially an ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act designation, but long COVID definitely is a new disability that people are experiencing.
Sure.
Yeah, which I think maybe something like 5% of the people who have come down with COVID yet.
That's a lot of people. Well,
Yeah, yeah. And that's a combination of neurological, psychiatric symptoms, physical symptom, medical symptoms. So it's a pretty complicated condition.
yeah. Well, thanks for your continued work in bringing up these issues. And I'm sure we'll have more articles coming from you in years ahead.
Yes, I will be looking forward to finding something new to write about.
So always glad to see you come in there, the email, the submission link, Carl. So again, this is an interview with Carl Blumenthal of Brooklyn Monthly Meeting in New York. And thank you, Carl, for being here with us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and let's do it again sometime soon.
Sounds good.
Okay.